What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. As always, and I am joined by the great Corbin Smith, over the host of Locked On Seahawks. We are doing the Kenny Pickett week round trip here, as always. And today, the Seahawks are on that ticket. Well, first of all, Corbin, how are you doing today, man?
I'm great and I can't complain. The weather's actually nice in the Pacific Northwest, which this time of year doesn't happen very often. So, looking forward to the draft. Feels like it's kind of slowly coming here at a crawl, but we're almost finally to the big weekend.
Yeah, almost there. And in Pittsburgh right now is currently snowing sideways. So, not great in Pittsburgh in the middle of April. But what will you do in Pittsburgh? It was 80 degrees here last week, and now it is snowing because, of course, Pittsburgh weather. Don't expect anything less. But the topic on the docket today, Kenny Pickett, quarterback from Pitt. Of course, it's been kind of a whirlwind of where Kenny Pickett could land, anywhere from 6 to it seems like 36, or wherever you have in that range. It felt like his stock has been going like this. And well, the Seahawks, I didn't expect them to be a potential landing spot until obviously the Russell Wilson trade. Now they have that number ninth overall pick, and they are a quarterback needy team with Drew Lock there, Geno Smith there as well, but have been linked to some quarterbacks, but not necessarily guaranteed to take a quarterback, it seems. But what are your impressions, Corbin, of Kenny Pickett to the Seahawks? Haven't heard a ton of smoke about this one, but I guess what would the scenario be where Kenny Pickett could become a Seattle Seahawk?
I would be really surprised, Nick, if it was at pick number 9. I don't know that they're going to take a quarterback in the first round anyway, but not that Pickett, I mean, we know that Kenny Pickett is a good athlete, so he would check that off for the Seahawks. They're going to be looking for a quarterback that has some mobility, some dual threat capabilities. My concern would be him as a downfield thrower. You know, Pete Carroll is going to want his offense to take those shots. It's kind of a conservative offense, and yet it's not. They like to take those shots downfield to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And I'm not sure that Kenny Pickett, out of this group of quarterbacks, is the best fit to do that. Now, they did have a representative at his pro day, so they've done their due diligence, and they might be putting up smoke screens right now. And he could be their favorite QB of this draft class, but that is not the way that I've interpreted it up to this point. It seems like Malik Willis, who would be a natural fit with his athleticism and his arm strength, as well as Desmond Ridder, who just had a private visit here with the Seahawks. Those two would seem to be the ones that maybe Seattle has the most interest in. And I personally, Sam Howell has had a visit with them back at the Combine. His strengths really fit Seattle's offense well, too. So that might be a guy to keep on the radar. I could see if Pickett falls in the end of the first round. Seattle's got 2 second-round picks. If they didn't take a quarterback at number 9 and they like Kenny Pickett, that might be where they're willing to trade up so they can get that fifth-year option, picking him late in the first round. That may be a possibility, but I think there are a couple other quarterbacks in this class that would be better scheme fits. And based on what we have seen, at least with their visits and the rumors that are out there, that they seem to have more interest in.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Again, most of the smoke I've heard, at least that, when I was at the combine, when I was at the Senior Bowl, it felt like Malik Willis was more of the thing. I mean, there's smoke that they might trade up for him, or they're 9, they're going to take him. And then there's been Ridder talk recently. The Pickett talk hasn't been there. And you kind of talked about the fit a little bit of Kenny Pickett in that offense. And so, most of the time we say Kenny Pickett is a good fit with most teams. Ran a pro style offense, pro ready, willingness to go. But Seattle's a little bit different because of that deep ball stuff. They run so many shot plays, and they have, DK Metcalf, and they have all these guys you want to unlock those traits for. So for you, I guess, looking at this overall, out of the top 5, where you can include Corral, Howe, Ridder, Willis, and Pickett, I guess Pickett in terms of fit would be 4 or 5, right?
Yeah, I'd have him down near the bottom of the list. And, actually, I'd probably put him at number 5. And that's not necessarily saying that I think he's the 5th worst quarterback in this class. I think you could say this about all quarterbacks. The system they land in, the team they land with, is truly one of the most important things for determining success. I just don't know that with what Seattle has liked to do, from a game manager standpoint, I think he would be great in Seattle's offense. I just think his skill set doesn't necessarily fit with what they want to do with the passing game. And that's why I mentioned Sam Howell, because Sam Howell's got his flaws in his game. but he can throw the ball downfield proficiently. He's got a cannon arm. He's got good touch on the deep ball. And I think you could say the same thing about Malik Willis, who's got his issues in the short and intermediate game, reading defenses, things like that. He's got a lot of room to grow, but he's got the arm strength and the touch downfield. And Desmond Ritter's kind of in the middle there. I've seen some plays where it looks like he can be that shot passer, and then there have been times the ball flutters on him. I've seen a lot of that with Matt Corral as well. And Kenny Pickett, it just doesn't look to me, based on the game tape that I've watched, that that's necessarily his game. So I just don't know that the scheme fit, the fit for what they're looking to do with their aerial attack necessarily fits with the player and the team.
Yeah, and I think Pickett, improved as a deep passer of his career at Pitt. But I think we would all agree here, Pitt fan or not, Seahawk fan, whatever you are, that's really not Kenny's strength. Kenny's been more of an intermediate to short type of guy. Scans the field really well in that area. Really good middle of the field passer, can fit into tight windows there. Just don't feel like the deep ball, especially to a guy like DK Metcalf. And I would point out this example specifically. Pitt is a really good wide receiver that's going to be probably a top 50 pick next year in Jordan Addison. And he's going to run sub 4.4. And every time Pickett threw a deep ball to him, he would always have to slow down a step or two. DK Metcalf is going to have to slow down a step or two. And you want someone that could hit DK in stride. And Russell Wilson had those special moon balls he threw, the signature big lob, and that worked perfectly with Lockett and Metcalf. I just don't see the same thing with Pickett, so I can see where it's coming from with that. But I guess if, let's say this does happen, and let's say the scenario does happen where he falls into the late first round, Seattle comes up and trades up for him. That's then a philosophy that you have to change, I guess, to suit what Kenny Pickett does. I mean, how would that even work? If that works, you're essentially not going with best fit, but the quarterback, I guess, value there at, say, maybe 29, 30, something like that is just too much to pass up.
Yeah, I think in that instance, it's not that Kenny Pickett can't ever complete a deep ball. I just don't think, compared to the rest of the top quarterbacks of this class, I just don't view that as one of his bigger strengths. Now, they do have an offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron that comes from Sean McVay's coaching tree. And they were trying to get that intermediate passing game going last year. And that was really the biggest issue with Russell Wilson, particularly in the middle of the field. And I think a lot of it had to do with his height. And quarterback's not going to admit that, but I think that he missed some of those opportunities, particularly to tight ends in the middle of the field. You're not going to have that issue with Kenny Pickett if you select him, because he doesn't have a 5'10" height. He can see over the line of scrimmage and he can complete those passes. And I think Desmond Ridder is really good in the intermediate part of the field as well. And so if they're wanting to focus more on that, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett can do damage anywhere on the field. They don't have to be running verticals, but that would take away a big part of your offense and a big strength for both those guys if you weren't taking many of those shots. And I think Pete Carroll would get antsy because he loves to run the ball, but he also loves to take those moon shots. And so I'm not saying it can't happen. If he falls and he's got other traits they really like, then absolutely Seattle could move up to get him. I just think of the top 5 quarterbacks, I personally, based on the film I've watched and knowing Seattle's offense throughout the Pete Carroll era, I just don't necessarily see the fit there for what they like to do throwing the football. The running aspect would be there. The game management aspect would be there. But that would be a big piece of the puzzle out of there if they can't consistently connect on deep passes.
And I guess I always have to ask about this question because it comes up so much. Played in Pittsburgh, but still, do you think Seattle would have any objections to the hand size? I don't, and I find this interesting just to talk about and kind of gauge NFL teams' philosophies. Some teams will have issues with it, some teams won't. Again, played in Pittsburgh, and we talked about the weather earlier, how erratic it is here. He's played in bad weather games. Do you think the hand size would be something that maybe holds Seattle back as well?
I don't think that that would be as big of a deal as looking at the specific skills he has throwing the football. It'd be something up for consideration, but the other quarterback they drafted a few years ago, Alex Magoo, had hands that were barely above 9 inches. Russell Wilson had huge hands for a guy of his size, 10.25 inches. So there's not necessarily a good sample size to know what their threshold would be on that. But 2 other quarterbacks that they were linked to, that they thought about potentially drafting, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, though both those guys have decent sized hands. So I don't know that that would be something that would really be an issue for the Seahawks. It might just be something else for them to consider when they're looking at him as a prospect. But I don't think that would be something, if they liked everything else, that would be a sticking point for them necessarily.
Hand size talk is the rave of the NFL draft talk around Kenny Pickett this year. Always find it interesting to see what teams' philosophies around it may be. All right, Corbin, thanks for coming on. Where can they find you, watch your stuff, do all that great things?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL, Locked_Seahawks. That's our Twitter for our show. Of course, 5 days a week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and we're streaming 5 days a week, video form on YouTube.